Mates, that's it. I'm done. I can't play this game anymore. The son of NHL legend Bobby Hull ended his career not with a celebration, but with the honest realization that the game had finally passed him by. Phil Esposito. By 1981, Phil Esposito was playing Esposito style. He made sure his last game was one to remember. Playing against the Buffalo Sabres at Madison Square Garden, Esposito knew this would be his final time on NHL ice. With the Rangers trailing 3-1, he set up 2 goals in the third period to help force overtime. Though the rear in his typical straightforward way. I've scored more goals than I ever dreamed possible. Now it's time to let someone else have a shot at it. He finished with 1,590 points, which at the time was second only to Gordie Howe. Joe Sakic. After 20 seasons, all with the same franchise, Joe Sakic's final year with the Colorado Avalanche in 2009 wasn't the ending such a great player deserved. At age 39, injuries had limited him to just 15 games all season. His back was giving him trouble, and a freak accident with a snowblower during the winter had damaged 3 fingers on his hand. In his final game against the Phoenix Coyotes, Sakic played just 17 minutes as his team lost 2-1. He managed 1 shot on goal and won 4 of his 7 faceoffs. A quiet end for someone who had scored 625 career goals. What made it even more bittersweet was that nobody knew it would be his last game. Sakic was hoping to return from his injuries, but his body just wouldn't cooperate. He announced his retirement that summer saying, "I just can't get my body to a point where I can compete at this level anymore." Even though his final game wasn't memorable, his entire career sure was, ending with 1,641 points and 2 Stanley Cups. Mike Bossy back pain cut short one of hockey's most amazing careers. Mike Bossy played his last NHL game in 1987 at just 30 years old. Far too early for someone who scored 573 goals in only 752 games. During his final season with the New York Islanders, Bossy was battling constant back pain but still managed to score 38 goals. His last game came against the New Jersey Devils, and even though he was hurting, Bossy showed one final flash of his scoring touch. He netted his last NHL goal in typical Bossy fashion, a perfect shot that found the top corner of the net. He also added an assist in that game, but the Islanders lost 4-3 in overtime. Nobody knew this would be the end, as Bossy hoped rest would help his back heal. It never did. After sitting out the entire next season trying to recover, he was forced to retire. His final words at his retirement press conference hit hard. "The one thing nobody can ever take away is that I scored 50 goals in 50 games when everyone said it couldn't be done anymore." Guy Lafleur had not one, but 2 final games in the NHL. His first retirement came in 1985 with the Montreal Canadiens at age 33, frustrated with his reduced role under coach Jacques Lemieux. But after being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, the Flower shocked everyone by returning to play for the New York Islanders in 1988. He then played 1 more season with the Quebec Nordiques, making his real final game extra special. It was against his old team, the Canadiens. On April 14, 1991, at age 39, Lafleur stepped onto the ice at the Montreal Forum one last time, but now wearing Nordiques blue instead of Canadiens red. The crowd gave him standing ovations every time he touched the puck. In his final NHL game, Lafleur scored 2 assists and nearly brought the crowd to tears when he almost scored in the third period, hitting the post. Though his Nordiques lost 4-3, the Montreal fans stayed long after the game, chanting "Guy, Guy, Guy," until he came back out for one final bow. His last words that night were perfect. "The Forum was my home for so many years. It was only right to say goodbye here." Patrick Waugh. Nobody expected Patrick Waugh's last game to come in a playoff series in 2003, but that's exactly what happened. At age 37, Waugh was still one of the NHL's best goalies, leading his Colorado Avalanche into a first-round series against the Minnesota Wild. In Game 7, with the season on the line, things fell apart in a way nobody saw coming. The Wild scored 4 goals in the final period, with the last one sliding between Waugh's legs, the kind of goal he almost never allowed in his prime. The Avalanche lost 3-2, and Waugh sat quietly in his locker after the game, knowing this wasn't how he wanted to be remembered. 2 months later, he announced his retirement, saying, "I don't have the same energy level and passion I used to have." His final game stats weren't pretty, 4 goals allowed on 27 shots, but his career numbers were amazing. 551 wins, 4 Stanley Cups, and the most playoff wins. 151 by any goalie. Even a bad final game couldn't take away from what Waugh did in his 19 NHL seasons. Steve Yzerman. After 22 seasons, all with the Detroit Red Wings, Steve Yzerman's career ended in 2006 during a playoff game that showed just how tough he really was. At age 41, playing on a knee that needed reconstruction surgery, Yzerman led his team into Game 6 against the Edmonton Oilers. Even though he could barely skate at full speed, the captain refused to give up. In his final game, Yzerman played 18 minutes, won most of his face-offs, and had one last scoring chance that just missed the net. The Red Wings lost 4-3, ending their season and Yzerman's career. After the game, he quietly shook hands with the Oilers players, just like he'd done hundreds of times before. His teammates knew this was the end, even though Yzerman hadn't announced it yet. A few months later, when he officially retired, he said something that summed up his whole career. "I wasn't the fastest or most talented player, but I worked hard every single day to make my team better." He finished with 1,755 points and 3 Stanley Cups. Bobby Hull, the Golden Jets' final NHL game, happened in 1980 with the Hartford Whalers, but his path there was unlike any other hockey legend. After being one of the NHL's biggest stars with the Chicago Blackhawks, Hull shocked everyone by jumping to the WHA's Winnipeg Jets in 1972 for $1 million contract, huge money back then. When the WHA merged with the NHL in 1979, Hull found himself back in the NHL at age 41. His last season wasn't pretty. He played just 9 games for the Whalers, a far cry from his 50-goal seasons. In his final game against the Quebec Nordiques, Hull's famous slapshot was gone, and he managed just 2 shots on goal in 13 minutes of ice time. The Whalers lost 4-1, and Hull knew it was over. He retired a few days later, telling reporters, "When you can't skate fast enough to make that slapshot work anymore, it's time to go." He finished with 913 career goals between the NHL and WHA, though only 610 counted in NHL records. Mark Messier, the Moose, played his final NHL game in 2004 for the New York Rangers at age 43. And unlike many other legends, he knew exactly when his last game would be. The Rangers weren't making the playoffs, so March 31st, 2004 against the Buffalo Sabres became Messier's goodbye to hockey. Madison Square Garden was packed with fans holding "Thank you, Mark" signs, and every time he touched the puck, the crowd went wild. Though the Rangers lost 4-3, Messier gave fans one last highlight, scoring his final NHL goal in the second period, number 694 of his career. He played 22 minutes that night, longer than usual because his teammates kept giving him extra shifts. After the game, fighting back tears, Messier skated to center ice and raised his stick to the crowd one final time. His last words that night became famous. "I was born to be a New York Ranger, and I lived my dream." He finished with 1,887 points and 6 Stanley Cups, cementing his place as one of hockey's greatest leaders. Maurice Richard, the greatest goal scorer of his era, played his final game in 1960, and it couldn't have ended in a better way. At age 38, the Rocket helped his Montreal Canadiens win their 5th straight Stanley Cup, something no team had ever done before. In Game 8 against the Toronto Maple Leafs, yes, they played best of 9 back then, Richard and his Canadiens won 4-0. Though he didn't score in his last game, the Rocket played 17 intense minutes, had 3 shots on goal, and was on the ice when the final buzzer sounded. After the game, as his teammates celebrated, Richard quietly sat in his locker room stall, knowing this was the end. A month later, he announced his retirement, saying, "My body can't take the hitting anymore, but at least I went out a champion." He finished with 544 goals in 978 games. Amazing numbers for that era. Most importantly, he retired as hockey's all-time leading goal scorer and inspired the NHL to name its goal-scoring trophy the Rocket Richard Trophy. Martin Brodeur, catch that made the crowd go wild. A few weeks later, he announced his retirement, saying, "I was hoping to play more, but watching the game from the bench made me realize I couldn't get excited about being a backup." He finished with NHL records that might never be broken: 691 wins, 125 shutouts, and 1,266 games played. The Blues immediately hired him as an assistant coach, making his last game the perfect bridge to his next hockey chapter. Bobby Orr. The greatest defenseman ever had one of hockey's saddest endings. At just 30 years old, Orr played his final NHL game in 1978 with the Chicago Blackhawks. a career cut far too short by knee injuries. After multiple surgeries on his left knee, they operated on it 13 times in his career, Orr tried one last comeback in November 1978. His final game was against the Detroit Red Wings, and he could barely skate. The same player who once scored goals while flying through the air could now only move at half speed. He played just 10 minutes that night, didn't record a point, and left the game early when his knee swelled up again. Nobody knew it at the time, but that would be the last time anyone saw number 4 on the ice. 2 months later, Orr made it official, saying through tears, "I can't play anymore. My knee won't let me." The saddest part, he was still getting paid millions by the Bruins, but he refused to collect his salary since he couldn't play. He finished with 915 points in just 657 games, numbers that seemed impossible for a defenseman back then. His career was short, but those who saw him play say he changed hockey forever. Mario Lemieux. Like his rival Wayne Gretzky, Lemieux's final NHL game came in 2006 against the Philadelphia Flyers, but there was no farewell tour or big celebration. At age 40, playing through constant back pain that had bothered him his entire career, Lemieux suited up for what would be his final game without telling anyone his plans. In true Mario style, he recorded an assist in the second period, the 1,723rd point of his career. He played 16 minutes that night, won most of his face-offs, and had 2 shots on goal. Late in the third period, he quietly skated to the bench, knowing this was his last shift ever. The Penguins lost 4-1, and Lemieux announced his retirement a few days later. What made his career even more amazing was that he had already retired once before in 1997, came back in 2000, beat cancer, and still played at an incredible level. At his retirement press conference, he said something that showed how tough his career was. "I've spent more time in hospital beds than on the ice, but I wouldn't change anything." He finished with 690 goals in just 915 games, numbers that would have been even higher if injuries and illness hadn't gotten in the way. Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey, played his last NHL game in 1980 at the unbelievable age of 52, making him the oldest player ever to play in the NHL. Playing for the Hartford Whalers, Howe wasn't just taking a victory lap, he scored 15 goals that season and made the All-Star team. In his final game against the Montreal Canadiens, Howe showed he could still play, recording an assist and nearly scoring in the third period. He played 15 minutes that night, and every time he touched the puck, both teams' fans cheered. The Whalers lost 4-3, but everyone stayed after the game to watch Howe take his final lap around the ice. What made his career even more incredible was that he played professional hockey in 6 different decades, starting in 1946. He had actually retired from the NHL once before in 1971, played 6 years in the WHA with his sons Mark and Marty, then came back to the NHL for one final season. At his retirement ceremony, Howe joked, "I finally had to retire because my son Mark started beating me at arm wrestling." He finished with 801 NHL goals, and if you count his WHA stats, he scored 975 professional goals, a record that still stands today. And now we come to the final player on our list, the one they called the Great One, the man who rewrote hockey's record books and changed the game forever. If there was ever a final game that brought the entire hockey world to a standstill, it was this one. Wayne Gretzky, April 18th, 1999, a date every hockey fan remembers. The greatest player ever was about to play his final game, and it seemed like the whole world was watching. Madison Square Garden was packed with celebrities, hockey legends, and fans who paid thousands just to say, "I was there when the Great One said goodbye." Gretzky's final game, at age 38 with the New York Rangers, was against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Though the Rangers lost 2-1 in overtime, nobody cared about the score. Gretzky picked up an assist in the second period, his 2,857th and final NHL point, a record that might never be broken. He played 22 minutes, longer than usual, taking extra shifts as fans chanted, "One more year." When the game ended, every player from both teams lined up to shake his hand. Fighting back tears, Gretzky took one final lap around the Garden, waving to fans and bowing to the crowd. His last words that night summed up his love for hockey. "I'm gonna miss this game, it's just time." The NHL retired his number 99 league-wide that day, the only player ever to receive that honor. His career ended with numbers that looked like typos: 894 goals, 1,963 assists, and 61 NHL records. Whether it was Gretzky's emotional farewell at Madison Square Garden, Waugh's unexpected playoff exit, or Lemieux's quiet departure from the game he dominated, These legends showed us there's no perfect way to say goodbye. Some left as champions, others battled through injuries, but each final game told a story as unique as the player who lived it. Everyone has their favorite. Maybe it's Howe playing until 52, or Lafleur's magical final game in Montreal, where even in a Nordiques jersey, the Forum crowd wouldn't stop chanting his name. Let us know in the comments which farewell touched you the most. If you enjoyed reliving these legendary moments, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell for more hockey history. See you next time.